Hey everybody, this is Perch. There's been a weird week of a lot of kind of interesting pieces all floating together that they feel like they connect. Do you ever have this impression sometimes where you have like 20, 30 bits of information and you start to get the sense that there's a connection here and you just can't quite see it. You can't quite put the pieces together all correct. But it's weird, right? So this week, and I don't know when this video will go up. I notice I have some videos I need to transfer from like March. And so sometimes these things go up quickly, sometimes they do not. One thing that people should understand about kind of my working day, I've got a lot of things going on, always. I've got a number of different projects that would probably kind of surprise you. Yes, I'm drawing my own comic, even though I'm a terrible artist. I'm drawing my own comic, and I'm taking a lot of time into it because, actually, to the point, I am not an artist. I hear people sometimes say things like, "I'm going to do a page a day or 2 pages a day." I'm like, I'm never going to be at that rate because I'm not an artist by trade. So, thus, it takes me a lot longer to kind of work through it and shape the kind of the images the way I want and everything else. But I still enjoy it when I get time to do it. Anyway, but this was also the week where there was the script leak for the Powerpuff Girls that was just thoroughly bizarre. Like you start to wonder, and I think there's probably a video in here which I'll talk about at a later time, which is how do we get here? Like how there well, actually, let me get to this other piece first. Ta Coates also gave some interviews talking about kind of Black Panther and kind of reminiscing on his run, and it's a very fluff interview where they're talking about how amazing he did and how incredible the work was and everything else. But he drops in there, kind of in the midst of it, that Marvel treats, yeah, I'm paraphrasing, but basically Marvel treats their creators kind of poorly, and it's or unfairly, I don't know exactly. It's always these kind of very twisted comments, which is like, oh, it's a great company, I'd love to work with it, they treat their creators very badly, but really wonderful people there. It's like, wait, what was that, what was that middle part? And it's puzzling because Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther and Captain America have not been um, what I would call at least amazing runs. Everybody's mileage varies in terms of what they like and what they're into and everything else, but I don't think these have been runs that will be remembered, say 10, 15 years from now. I don't know if that's exactly the bar. That tends to be my bar, but different people have different views. I think by and large, the sales figures have been pretty anemic in both cases, and nothing much was added. Like here's the thing: I think that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you'll be able to look back and say, during the Mark Grunwald run of Captain America, a bunch of kind of major things were established. We introduced John Walker. We had Captain America kind of doubt who he was. Major things happened. Roger Stern had some stories that were we still remember kind of those contributions. And Ed Brubaker actually did his run, the death of Captain America and kind of all those pieces. And these are all runs that will be remembered. There's some other creators in there. Like I like Rick Remender, and I actually enjoyed Rick Remender's run on Captain America, but it's not going to, I doubt it will be one that is remembered 20, 25 years from now. And I say that with some confidence because a lot of people have forgotten that Remender was on Captain America now in 2021. And that was just a couple of years ago. So, and Nick Spencer's run may be remembered as that time that they really screwed up and made Captain America a Nazi for a while. Like, that may come up. But generally speaking, I think Brubaker, Stern, Grunwald are probably the three that are really going to get remembered. And that's how it's going to be. I don't think Ta-Nehisi Coates, his run will be remembered. And that's my bar of what I would say is one of those kind of legendary runs. And in fairness, like I said, I like Rick Remender. I like a lot of what he contributed to X-Force, and I do think his run on X-Force will be one of those runs that is remembered, but his Captain America won't. So this isn't about personal preference or people. It's kind of the luck of the draw. Not everybody gets that kind of run, and in many cases, I think the way people are producing comics now, and maybe this was a bit Ta-Nehisi Coates' point, it's very hard to have those memorable runs. If you've got creators and writers working on books 6 issues at a time, where there's no real, any kind of long-term planning. In some cases that happen, it's not great. It's kind of heartbreaking interviewing Jim Zub, and he's talking about some of his plans for Champions, which were good plans. But then he's very forthright about talking about how they got kind of on the wrong end of a lot of relaunches and some other things, and it wound up interfering with what sounded like a good idea for Champions, but it wasn't to be. So as a result, that run on Champions, which he was off to some good start, is not going to be 20, 30 years from now. People are not going to remember that run. And it's not always that like the creators coming in and writing a crap story. It's also that there's circumstances that, in fact, in many cases, there's circumstances that are preventing the story from getting to where it's going. But it got me thinking, this weird week of plans and everything else, how you can have a good idea in your head, something that seems really, really good, something that is just sounds great. You're certain about it. And the execution happens and it just doesn't work out. I mean, I'll give you an example completely unrelated to comics that is quick. I had, as a thank you to an interview I had a while back, and you'll know who I'm talking about, but one of the people I interviewed had a fondness for coffee. And so I thought, hey, as a nice thank you, one thing I should do, we've got a lot of local coffee places around Seattle. As it turns out, who knew Seattle is big into coffee. And I will go and I'll get some beans, and then I'll FedEx the beans to this person. Who was very nice, that agreed to do the interview, and I was thankful. So I mean, like, this is an easy thing I can do. I'll send some beans, and I did that. Well, so this is my idea. Great idea, I think. However, in the execution, I get the beans. I realize as I'm getting them that in my head I pictured like this locally sourced, very obviously bespoke packaging that really encompassed the area. That really felt like Seattle and felt unique and felt like some kind of thing. And as I got them, I went to a coffee shop I love, which is a Storyteller that's near Pike Place Market. If you've ever been there, you got to go. It's a really cool little coffee place. A lot of people go to the first Starbucks, which is like less than half a block away, and they all go there and they miss Storyteller, which was so much more awesome. Better coffee, better environment, all cross board, all better. All right, so I got some beans there, and as I'm getting them, like, this looks like just kind of a package that you'd get from a grocery store. It doesn't feel special. But I'm like, well, okay. But my plan already starts to feel a little shaky. And then I go to another little coffee shop that's closer to me in Redmond, and they do amazing coffee as well. And I buy some coffee there. I'm like, okay, this bag looks a little bit more authentic. But then as I'm looking at it in the car, I'm like, oh, this came from it's like packaged in Los Angeles. I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is not it. And then I get busy, and I get somebody else to send them. And my idea is, like, I'll send them FedEx, so they'll get it the next day. But somewhere wires got crossed, and the copy gets sent UPS. So it gets there in like 6 days. And I just, at this point, I'm like, I'm thinking, if I was a recipient of this, I'm getting this package from UPS with 2 bags of what looks like generic grocery store beans in it. Like, I'm thinking, what the hell is this? So it's like, I felt like I had a good idea, and the execution completely bombed. Why I took you through that long story? Because I think there's a lot of that in comics. I think that in many cases, I interview creators, or I meet up with them at cons, or I go out drinking with people, and they tell me this idea. And it's a really cool idea. It sounds unique. It sounds different. It's like, it checks all the boxes of what you want as a fan. Like, hey, we're going to take this character that has been kind of put through the mill in recent years, and has had a lot of changes to their personality, and finally we're going to get that person back to their core kind of prototype of who they are, and we're going to pull the rug out from under people by realizing that in this transformation back into the core character, that something has changed, and evil has infected that character, and now they're working as a double agent, and the race is on to kind of, how do we repair or undo this, and how do we we thought we got what we wanted back, but we didn't really. There's a bad surprise in there, a twist, and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And this was I'm pitching it poorly, but when I first heard this concept, I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty neat. This sounds like something a little different, and definitely it's like a what kind of moment, and there's a lot of storytelling ideas that you can do off this, and this sounds like a good idea. And then the execution comes out. It's like Captain America is a Hydra agent, and you're like, whoa, that sucks. Like this was a good idea. You had something in your head that was new and unique and interesting for comics and everything else. But then when it actually happened, it this is not going to go well at all. And I think this happens a lot in comics. And I think especially now, I think the interesting part is what is going on in comics today. Is it the short contracts that people are under? Is it like what are the different elements that are basically creating this result more often, where really good ideas come out, but then the execution, the insertion into the comics, the actual reading of this thing creates a miserable experience. I wasn't in the room and didn't hear any of this ahead of time, but I would be willing to bet that a lot of the initial brainstorming for Ten of Swords sounded amazing. Like, hey, we're gonna really dig deep into some X-Men history, and we're gonna have this other world and Saturnine, and it's going to be there, and we're going to have this tournament, but the tournament's going to have this mix of, like, on the surface it will seem kind of innocent, but there will be some deep consequences underneath it, and like I bet the initial pitch for this, which was also probably pitched as like a 6-part story that ballooned into 24. But anyway, I'll bet that initial pitch was reasonable, and then it gets executed in a comic book, and it's like, how in the hell did we get from there to here? And as you know, if you get a chance to talk to a writer or something, often they will open up about, I had this really great idea, and you almost see the sadness kind of on their face of, it was yeah, we were going to do this and this and this, but then we had to cross over here, and then the run got shortened by 6 issues, and then we changed artists 3 times, and you almost like see the sadness kind of take over their face, and it's like, yeah, and then we got what we got. And I think this is happening a lot. I think a lot of the runs in the comics that people revile on the internet and really hate are in part a consequence of this, where the initial idea wasn't a bad one, but the execution just stumbled to the point where it just wasn't like good intentions, bad outcome. And my theory is that there's a number of factors going on in Western comics, in US comics right now, that are making it less likely for the great idea to translate to a good outcome. I've already said a couple, like I think these shorter contracts do it. I think some of the way that comics are produced and distributed does. I think there's a bunch of little factors here that are almost guaranteeing this result. And this is not me saying like, oh, every idea is great. No, there are some stinker ideas out there from the very beginning, no doubt about it. But I think that there's more. I think that the current structure is increasing the odds of a bad result. And I think that this is something that probably bears a lot more thought. And again, this has been a weird week where we have like the Powerpuff Girls, and they're going to make that cartoon to a live action show, and then we see the script, and it's like an abomination of just one of the dumbest, most terrible things you've ever heard in your life. And it's like, okay, so how did we ever get here? I feel fairly confident that the people who are hired to write the script and come up with a story were not sitting around going, let's come up with the most miserable pile of shit idea we can possibly imagine. I feel like I feel like that's a safe bet. So how then did we get there? How was it that maybe some people sat in a room and had some good ideas, and we got dialogue around the Powerpuff Girls wanting to release Bubbles nude pics? Like who and how in the world did we get from A to B? Anyway, something to think about. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always fun. And thanks for listening.